Let's go back into JavaScript and we're going to actually generate a visual dice within our HTML, all using JavaScript. I've stripped out quite a bit of the functionality from the previous lesson. I've kept in the roll because we want to still keep that, creating a random number from whatever we're rolling all the way up to 1, all the way through to 6, and then returning back that number. I've also kept the button event listener on the button element, and I've updated the div to have a class of output, and using the query selector, selecting the element with a class of output. So we're ready to move on to the next step, and this is where we're going to build out our roll. So setting up a variable, we can call it roll dice, and we're only going to have one die using the function that we used earlier, returning back 6. We're going to console log out whatever the roll of the dice was. So this is going to give us a numeric value. So just as before, we can get random numeric values all the way from 1 to 6, and that's what's being returned back from our function that we built out earlier. So what we want to do is we want to build some dice, and we're going to create a function in order to build the dice. And we want to just pass in this numeric value. So we can build out a dice, whatever number we want, we can build out the dice to represent that number. And that means that adding in the dots that we need in order to represent that number on the dice themselves. So let's create an element. We're just going to call it, and building out a function called builder. And this is going to contain the value of roll dice. So remember again, this is a value anywhere from 1 to 6. Next, adding in the function, so that builder function, passing in the number value in the argument. We want to first start out by creating our main container. So using the document create element method in JavaScript allows us to dynamically create elements. The element that we want to create is going to be a div. So for now, we're going to return back that div object that we've created, and now it's going to be represented within the variable holder, and we can use that to output it using append child, which allows you to add in elements to other elements. So we're selecting that output, and we're using append child method to add in that returned object, which is represented in holder, onto our page. And we don't see a whole lot happening, but now when we go into inspect, you're going to see that we've generated within output, we've got a brand new div. And the more we click it, the more divs we're generating. And within this div, I want to apply a class to it. So we can add that in here where we can do div. So getting that div object that we've just freshly created, using set attribute, and the attribute that we're going to set is class, and the value that we're going to associate it to it is dicer. So that's the class that we're going to add in. Going up into our style, let's create a class of dicer, and this is the way that the dice are going to be represented visually within our page. Set a width, so we can have a width of 90 pixels and a height of 90 pixels as well, so it's a square. And I'm going to add in border radius to make it slightly rounded at the corners. So let's see what that looks like. So now when we refresh, go back into the console, when we hit roll, we see that we're adding in multiple dice. And what we actually want to do is we want to remove the dice so that we've only got that one element there. And I'll show you how to do that in the upcoming lesson. So for now, build out, create a brand new function that's going to create a div, add a class of dicer to that div, return it back into the element that called it, setting it in that variable, and then adding in that newly created div to the output element on your page. So add that functionality in. When you click the button, it's going to add in a new div, append it to your output element.